All right, here we go with the SEO tools training, the 5 tools that I use to analyze their site's performance and just to get better results overall. So we're going to start off with Google Analytics. And most of you have probably already heard of this and you may have had it installed, but I just wanted to focus on a few things to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have your properties set up correctly. You probably only have one account and possibly one property if you only have one set website. There should only be one site per property. And then over here is the views, and that's what really I wanted to talk about. So you should have a few different views for your site. This is just one of my sites, but you realistically want to have a view that is all of your website data historically, so that just in case anything goes wrong, you can have that to rely on. And then typically I'll like to create a view for testing different things, and then I'll also do a view that has filters on it. So what do I mean by filters? Well, one thing that I see often is that people will have analytics accounts that haven't been filtered at all. So it's basically bringing in every type of data. That means every time you click on your own website just to check something or you're working on it, it records those data points. So it's skewing the data. So what you want to do is go to your view and filters. And the first thing you want to do is add a filter for your own computer or your company's computer that you work with, any of your employees, etc. So I typically just call it internal filter, and you want to go to exclude traffic from IP addresses. If it's from a specific IP address, if you're aware of the host name, any of these other options, you can choose that, but typically IP address will do just fine. And then you want it to be equal to, and if you don't know what your IP address is, you can literally just say, what's my IP? Do a quick search and it'll tell you. You want to use the most current version. I use the IPv6. That's what you've taken. Now you've taken care of your data being skewed, right? So we want to have good data. We want to have the right kind of data. And this isn't going to cover how to actually install Google Analytics. There's plenty of guides on how to do that, but make sure that your installation is properly set up here. You'll get a message confirming that you've got it set up as soon as you do. And the same with filtering your internal traffic. So the second main component of what you want to focus on within your analytics is just making sure that you're actually viewing organic results if you're worrying about SEO. If you have multiple marketing channels, if you're running paid ads and things like that, then you can have a lot of different points of traffic coming into the site, but realistically you will want to focus on organic. So one thing you can do is just filter everything you're looking at through an organic traffic view, which if I remove this, it'll give you an option after all of the users to add a segment. And just selecting organic traffic will allow you to see that through the view and see the data through how traffic is coming in organically versus any of the other channels. Next up is viewing acquisition. This is where your traffic to your site is coming in. And if you go to all traffic and then source and medium, the source is like which specific sites it's coming through, and the medium is what category of traffic, so organic, referral, etc. And what I like to do is filter my data through organic because it takes into account DuckDuckGo, Bing, Yandex, if you're getting traffic from Russia. So it's important to just understand that this data is useful to understand, because your organic traffic is what the point of SEO is. It isn't there. It works in with your larger marketing strategy, but really you just want to have a good handle on your organic traffic, because you can have attribution errors where you're getting a lot of traffic from a Facebook campaign and you think your SEO is doing well when realistically your search efforts might be going poorly, but they're being supported by those other efforts. So the next thing is just setting up a report so that you don't have to dig into all these data points if you're not familiar with it. And you can just go to customization and dashboards. And if you create one, there's many different ways that you can create your own dashboard and add in your own segments. And in fact, I'd recommend doing that and picking the metrics that are most relevant to you. It could be organic traffic, it could be events, it could be the amount of new users that came to the site per month. But the starter dashboard typically gives you a good spot of the different metrics you're going to want to check on an ongoing basis. So once this report is set up, you'll be able to just view it quickly at a glance whenever you sign into your analytics, and it can be useful if you don't want to waste a lot of time or you aren't using it as much. Then it can be just a quick way to not have to spend time digging into the data. And realistically, just checking these on a bi-monthly, monthly basis, understanding how the traffic on your site is trending, understanding the user metrics, the engagement metrics, you will improve upon your site's efforts just by tracking things more. If you see trend down, or if you see a negative trend for 7 months, you're going to find a way to correct it if you boil down and dig into the data. If you're just making changes and you're unaware of how it's affecting your site, then you're sort of just taking stabs in the dark, and I'm sure you know that doesn't end up well. So some metrics that I really want you to focus on in 2019 and beyond. If you go to behavior, we can take a look at site content, and then we'll start off with landing pages. So landing pages just means that these are the entry points of your website. What you're going to want to note is what are these pages? Are these what you would expect? Have you put a lot of effort into these? If you haven't put a lot of effort, what can you sort of view these pages as to understand why they're being favored in the search engines, versus if there's pages you put a lot of effort into and they're not, over a justifiable period of time, they're not generating people coming onto the pages as landing pages, then you're going to want to reevaluate. So being familiar with this report is important to understand how people are coming to your site, and then analyzing those pages more specifically in a method that's maybe more qualitative versus quantitative can give you good insight to what's working on your site. The next one is just all pages, and this is an overview of, these aren't necessarily landing pages, they're just pages on your site and the metrics that are associated with it. So this is just over time, if somebody viewed this page or not. And realistically, it's along the same lines. You want to make sure that your strongest pages are showing up with the most page views, that people are spending a good amount of time on them and not spending 10 seconds and bouncing quickly. You're just going to want to make sure that all of the things that indicate engagement, so bounce rate, this is the rate of people that land on the page and then immediately leave. You're going to want to make sure that this is pretty low depending on what you want the page that they land on to do. So for your home page, it shouldn't be in the high 90s, right? You don't want people to land on your home page and leave unless your home page's purpose is to just have one call to action. You're going to want them to check out other pages, especially if you're a service provider. Average time on page, this is just imperative going forward. You want your users to be spending time consuming your content. You want to be giving them value and having them perform an action afterwards. Another important metric is just the amount of pages visited. You want to make sure that they're viewing more pages on your site, connecting pages and things like that. Lastly, just checking out the behavior flow. So behavior flow is an interesting thing that you can do in analytics that allows you to see, hey, this is where people are coming onto your site the most. This is where you're getting the most entries. And then it just sort of follows you through their path. And what you want is that this is a logical progression. So if I have a page or say I have my home page and then I have a service page next, a logical conclusion that I would want is either to view a sub-service page if they need more specificity, or get in touch with me via a contact form, a download. But whatever the call to action is, this should be very logical. If I'm getting a lot of drop-offs after initial pages, then you're probably not satisfying your user's intent if that's not what's expected. If it's a large blog post and it's filled with great information, then having a higher bounce rate or drop-off rate is typically acceptable. If you want to find ways to funnel those users into other parts of your site, ideally, but it's not uncommon to see people being satisfied by a really good blog post and then leaving. So behavior flow doesn't tell all, but it does give you an overview of how users are using your site and where they're entering and at what different points they're utilizing your pages. And then the last and possibly most important element of analytics that is underutilized is this conversions tab. So everything is about ROI in my life. I'm always driven to figure out how I can get the best return on everything that I do. So again, not for this site, but for my other client sites, we always have goals that are set up. And this can be a contact form submission, it can be a click on to call button, it can be a download, whatever you define as one of your primary conversion for a target user. And how you do this is just going down to the settings cog, go to your view that you want the goal, and you can have different goals for different views, and just setting up the goal, because from there you can attribute all of your efforts. So which pages lead to which purchases the most, which parts of your content lead to people interacting with your site the most. And there's some goals that are pre-set up, but typically mine are custom and they involve pretty basic things. So one, you might have, if somebody fills out a contact form, you have a thank you page. It's as simple as putting the URL, right, of whatever the thank you form is on your site. And then once you save that, and you can verify the goal to make sure that if you set it up correctly, it'll tell you what the conversion rate will be, or have been in the last week. But from here, you can start to assess not just am I getting traffic, not just are my pages doing well, but are my pages actually leading to conversions and leading to meaningful interactions on my site. So you want to have as many goal and conversion points as possible to track, because it gives you a tangible measure of your efforts. So that's not a comprehensive view of analytics, but those are some common mistakes that I see, some things that you want to keep in mind if you're a beginner. And then next, and by the way, I like Google's tools. They're free, so it's easy for beginners to use, and they're not the end-all be-all, but they can be very powerful. So next up is Google Search Console. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to install it, but I will show you just some ways that I use it to get ahead. So Google Search Console basically just gives you a bunch of data about how your website is appearing in search, how many impressions it's getting, so how many times it appears in the search results, the amount of click-through, so when people see one of your web pages in a result, how often do they click on it, the average position of all of the web pages on your site in the search engine results pages, and then how many clicks you're getting. So this data is just extremely powerful. It tells you how people are coming to your site, which phrases they're typing in, which pages they're landing on, the devices that they're using, which countries and regions they're from. And so this can just give you a better understanding of not only what types of content are driving these users to your site, but also how to optimize that content. So the first sort of technique I use to utilize this is, actually, let me take a step back. So first of all, you want to make sure you have the right property installed. Search Console is very specific. So if you have a www subpath in front of your website, you need to install that. If you have an TSL certificate, the HTTPS, you need to install that version of it. Okay, so there are many ways to utilize Search Console, but primarily these are the ways that I use it to move the needle for my clients. So the first thing you want to do is analyze pages that are getting a high amount of impressions. So if you just click on impressions, it'll filter your results from high to low, right? So these are the terms. If you have a lot of impressions but a low amount of clicks, it can be discouraging, but what it means is you can look at it as an opportunity. So this means that Google views your site as relevant for these queries, these search terms. However, you're not relevant enough to rank well and then derive any traffic or clicks from it. However, you can use this as a guide to inform which queries that your site are relevant for and start to develop content around that. So for instance, I would take a look at DIY SEO, right? So if you click on the term, it'll start to filter by that term. And if you go down to pages, you can see that I have a blog post called SEO Tips for Small Businesses. But if we take a look at it, we can see that the areas that we might be able to improve by looking at other types of content with this same search. So if we did the term, SEO Tips for Small Business, and we looked in the search engine results, we could start to analyze the page against those other pages that are doing well, right? Is it the length of the content? Do I need to add some more screenshots and how-tos? Do I need to make it a longer, shorter resource? Do I need to use a video, utilize all these other things? So really, Search Console is just a guide, but it should inform you on what sorts of actions you can take. On that note, say we're targeting SEO in Vancouver, Washington, because that's where I am. So you also want to check in on your pages for each query and make sure that the search terms are matching up to the right pages. You can get a case where Google is ranking a page that you have designated or that you don't have designated for that term in your mind with your strategy, but that it deems relevant. So you want to make sure that the terms are consistent with the pages that they're supposed to be ranking for. So in this case, my homepage has a lot of authority. That's probably why it's doing better than my SEO specific page. The way my site is set up, my homepage is supposed to be the landing page, and then the users are filtered to the correct service pages as it goes. So this data shows me that that's consistent with my strategy. If I had a page called Social Media Strategy 101 and SEO Vancouver, Washington was showing up, then I'd have a problem and I'd have to do some research into those pages to figure out why it's being cannibalized. So on that note of having a lot of impressions, not a lot of clicks, what are we going to do to remedy that? So in a little bit, when we dive into using the Yoast SEO plugin for your site, we'll get into how to optimize these things, but let's take a look at what are called title tags and meta descriptions. So we can go to something like copywriting services. So we've all seen this before, right? This is a standard search engine results page, or SERP, if you want to use pretentious jargon. And so this right here, this element in blue that's getting underlined, that's called the title tag. The green text is the URL path, that's your website URL, and then the subpage. And then this text in gray below is the meta description. So you want to have really compelling titles and meta descriptions that are relevant to the user's needs and that encourage them to click through. And typically when you see high impressions and low clicks, it's either an issue of the content on the page isn't very specific to the user's needs, or that the meta information that I just showed you, the title tag and the meta description, aren't optimized enough to entice people to click through. And you really want to spend time boiling down what those terms are, and I'll get into how to optimize them a little bit later, but just know that that's how you sort of go through the process of implementing changes to get those clicks more in line with the impressions and boost your click-through rate. So another cool thing you can do is add in this filter of average position. And again, you can go to position and filter your search results by position. And if you go back to queries, the insight that this can give you is, let's take something like, so search engine marketing service. I actually don't think that I have this term on my site. So what's happening is that's why it had such a low amount of impressions in just over a year. But I do actually offer search engine marketing services technically. But I don't have that term on my website, so I probably don't have a lot of content supporting that. But Google still knows that that's what I do because it's a very sophisticated algorithm. So we can see my average position is 389th, right? It makes sense because I haven't had a strategy around this. But what we can do with this data is take, just like the impressions that are high but low clicks, we can take the search terms that have really, really high positions. This is basically irrelevant in a search. Nobody goes to the 38th page. And we can take these terms and start to either create new content. So completely, I could create a landing page that said search engine marketing services, and I could optimize it around that term. And hopefully that would just continue to increase my relevancy for that site, and I could start to see some movement to increase those positions. Or I could take my home page, so an existing piece of content, and actually let's do that. Let's take a look at, if you click on the query, it'll filter by the query. Go down to pages and see what pages are already being deemed relevant. So in this case, it's my paid search, my PPC page, or the home page. We could then add those new content types, or we can add the type of content that's relevant around those search terms that are ranking low, and utilize the positive rankings of those pages that are doing well to gain visibility for those terms. So just easy insights to glean that can inform strategy instead of just guessing. And you basically want to spend your entire life here, your every waking moment in this dashboard, understanding how people are coming to your site, because nothing will help your SEO efforts more than understanding who your users are, what they're typing in to find you, and what the intent is behind their searches. So with that in mind, let's head over to Yoast while it's still fresh in your mind of titles and meta descriptions. Yoast is relegated to WordPress as a CMS, so understand that if you use Squarespace, Wix, in fact, actually, if you use Wix, just quit the video right now because you don't deserve to do well in search. But Yoast is an SEO or a WordPress plugin, so just bear in mind for all of you people that don't have this, you can skip over this part, but it's pretty important because a lot of you are using it, especially if you're beginners. So you're going to install the plugin. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. It's very simple to install plugins. That's for another video. But once you have it installed, there are a few main things that you're going to want to do. So the first thing to keep in mind is that this is a tool. It is not, once you get all these little green light happy faces, your website will miraculously start to make you millions of dollars and rank really well. It's to be used as a guide to help you make informed and practical decisions on what implementations will help to move the needle for your site. So for beginners, it's very powerful because a lot of these factors you're not familiar with, and it will give you insight into how search engines function. But me personally, I almost never use Yoast, their analysis. I just use it to update my title tags, meta descriptions, and sometimes the URL path. Just keep that in mind when you're going through making these updates. Consider the why. Why are you doing this? Don't just spam keywords to get the green light to show up. Don't ever do anything for the result. You want to utilize these suggestions as a path to help you make good decisions and update your site accordingly. So let's get to it. The title tag right here. If you just click on it, this will be empty for you, or the default. It's pretty straightforward on how to update this. This green bar is how many characters, the character limit for those search results. You'll see it'll cut off eventually. None of these sites have it, but it'll cut off if you go over a certain amount of characters. So like I said, I've done plenty of testing with my title tags. I know exactly how this shows up in search results, and I'm fine with this result. But you might not want your tag to get cut off. It might cut off at the wrong point. So I would stick within the guide if I were you of the character limit, so make sure this is green. How do you build a good title tag? So you always want to start off with your primary keyword to the left of the title tag. It'll be the first thing your users see, and it just communicates to search engines, hey, this is important. Now, it's not going to make you automatically do super well. It's not get out a magic wand or anything. But you want to start off there, and then typically you want to get into a secondary keyword or some primary benefit. So let's just analyze this title. So think you have TMD. They're targeting temporomandibular disorder, which is your jaw joint, essentially, things going wrong with it. What you need to know and how to get relief. So their primary is TMD treatment, as you can see in the URL. So TMD is close to the beginning. It's not at the absolute beginning, but this works because it reads well. And you want to keep that in mind. Users are going to read this, so it needs to satisfy the search engine's understanding and the user. But then what people need to know, right? The most important things, and then how to get relief. That's the main benefit statement. You want to consider these things when you're constructing your title tag in that order, and then just appending it or ending it out with your brand it's just good branding practice to keep top of mind awareness. As for the meta description, a good formula to follow is keeping that primary keyword in there. So for me, it might be SEO, making sure it appears once, because as you can see in search results, the terms that you use are bolded. So TMD treatment, right? They're bolded, and it just helps people click through. If you're a local company, you're going to want to put in your local geography, right? Just so people understand that it's relevant to their needs and you're not some huge conglomerate. Or if you are a huge conglomerate, just make sure that you have very specific landing pages, but that's for a different video. And then a call to action, right? You want them to do something. So, call now to book a free consult. Give them something to do. It's pretty recognized now that if you tell your users to do a specific action, they are more likely to do it. And realistically, just speak in language that they can understand. So I could use a ton of marketing jargon in my description to describe what I do, right, as an SEO inbound agency. Basically, we want to let business owners understand that we're just going to help them generate more leads. We're focused on results, and we care about ROI, and that's important to communicate. From there, you're going to want to put in your focus key phrase. So each page should typically go after, I would say, its own set of topics. So a topic could be SEO, it could be paid ads, it could be Facebook ads, but it can also be a pretty broad keyword, something like SEO, Facebook ads, etc. And go ahead and put it in the focus key phrase. And from there, you'll get a list of all the metrics that they track in order to do good, in order for search engines to like the page. You can use the red, green, and orange lights as an indication if you're on the right track or not. So most of these are pretty straightforward. Using your target phrase within the first part of your content. And realistically, this isn't like a huge ranking factor. It's more for your user experience, which is an indirect signal that the page is quality. The title width, like I said, mine is over on purpose, but yours I would recommend keeping it shorter and within the limit so that it doesn't get cut off in the results. Outbound links. This isn't like some magic wand as well. The outbound links just means if you're using information that you cite a source or you use a statistic, just link out to it. It's helpful for your users and it helps establish your credibility and your website's domain authority. Same thing as the title description length or the title tag, the meta description. Just keep it in the character limit because you don't want anything to get shortened in the search results. Key phrase in the title. You definitely want to include your target term or your target topic in the title tag like we spoke about before, and that's something that you can use in tandem with Search Console to figure out what these phrases are. Internal links are just what you place from one page that goes to another page of your website, and you want to do this skillfully and help users if they're looking for one type of page and you have a resource that is related to that. You can link out to that resource on one of your pages. If you're on a home page, it should link out to the other major pages on your site. So just make sure you're internally linking in a way that is intuitive and helps the user understand what page they're going to. You might hear some advice to just put your keywords in a bunch of times, and using exact match keywords is fine for these internal links, but you don't only want to do that. You'd want to use natural language, a combination of exact match keywords and related phrases as well. Key phrase density, this is a pretty outdated metric. You don't want it to be like 10% of your content be your same keyword repeated over and over again, but if you tend to keep it under 8% or 0.8%, you'll be fine. Just make sure that you're not putting keywords in for the sake of putting keywords in. Make sure that it read your content out loud, and make sure that it sounds like you're talking to a normal person in natural language. That's the key to having a good page. Using the key phrase in the meta description, we've already talked about that, on how to write a good description. Subheadings. So some of you might not be familiar with subheadings, but let's take a look at a piece of content. So these right here, these are actually HTML defined pieces of code called tags. Now, how to do these depends on what your editor is, if you're writing code from scratch, if you're using a CMS like WordPress, but in general, it's these tags right here, these heading tags that are HTML defined, and throughout your content, you want to use the H2 through H3 and H4 tags. You want to use them and nest them in a way that makes sense. So if I have a big H2 and I have 3 subpoints, I can use H3s below, and then so on and so forth within each tag. And as far as the primary topic of the page, that should be nested in an H1. But using related phrases in these subheadings That's what Yoast is talking about when it says key phrases in the subheading. So you want to use those skillfully and use related phrases like synonyms and variations and topically relevant phrases in those subheadings to just communicate to search engines that you're relevant. In your image alt tag or alternative attribute. So within every image, especially the featured image for a page on WordPress, you're going to have your alt text, and you basically just want to, this is for screen readers or people with visual disabilities, but search engines look at this information too to inform them what the page is about. So I might say SEO services in my local geography, and then whatever the company name is, right? That might be a good alt tag, and that's just to communicate again the relevance that the page has for whatever your target phrase is. And then text length. This is something that depends. It's on a case-by-case basis. There's no magical length. But typically I find that the longer and more in-depth and informational the content is for most topics, the better it'll perform, especially if it's an article or a landing page for a service. If it's a quick question and answer, then you don't really need to put 600 words on how many calories is in a bottle of Pepsi. That doesn't need a dissertation, but you do want to satisfy your users' expectations of the content, but in general, I find that the more opportunities you have to include relevant phrases, the better and the more broad range of terms that your page will rank for. Next, we'll go to Keyword Planner. A lot of you may have heard about this, but this is where you can, it's Google's own tool on how to find keywords. And if you just go to Keyword Planner, you just type in your search bar, you'll find this. You do have to have an account or make one, but you don't have to spend money or have an ad account to end up utilizing this. If you just go to find new keywords, we can take a look at something like copywriting services. And from here, Google will give you a list of related phrases. It'll give you how many average monthly searches it gets, but take this with a grain of salt because they're very loose and broad averages. A competition score from low, medium to high, and then the bid, and this bid is how much people are paying for this keyword. It can kind of give you a glimpse into how much money is to be made for each of these terms. So what I like to do is just select all of them and just create a group name. And then add to your plan. And then from there, you can just keep refining your search. So I might say copywriting, just in general. And I'll have a larger pool of ideas. And you can just add these. And it'll just keep adding to the total. So once you've got all of those added to your plan, you can go to your plan overview. And you want to get as many phrases as possible. Think thousands of terms, so just keep typing in related phrases to whatever type of content, to whatever landing page, to whatever service you offer, until you've got a pretty sizable list. And I would recommend for each different service, so say you did copywriting, you did blogging, you also did web design, those would be an interesting mix of services, but you want to have each of these individual reports for each one of your services. And then you would just go and download the plan forecasts. I've already gone ahead and done this for you just to show you what it looks like. So here you'll have your keywords, the amount of estimated, I have clicks per month, and then the impressions, and then what those clicks are going to cost. I filter it from low to high because I like looking at it that way, but you can filter it from whatever way you'd like. So the point of this is to get an idea for how the users are searching for this product, these services, or whatever the phrase is. I typically go through most of these, read through them, understand what they're about, understand the language that people use and what they're searching for. And what you want to look out for is phrases, the ones that I have in black, I go through it bit by bit and I highlight the ones that I see that have a good amount of impressions, so they have a good amount of searches per month, but there's a very low competition score, and this is out of 100. Because these are going to be the opportunities that aren't previously taken advantage of, and it means that we typically might have a shot. So I go through and I gather these phrases I gather my list of what I think will be relevant to my products or services. And here we have an example of a CPA where I've taken all of those main ones that are going to be money keywords for the business: certified accountant, CPA business, CPA company, local CPA, and I compiled them into their own list. So from here, I have two categories, and this is where the strategy comes in. You want to have a designation for each of these terms. You want to make sure the terms that you're targeting have their own relevant page, or a group of terms are all being targeted on a page. So I have these cornerstone content pages. This would be if I was a family lawyer or a criminal lawyer, and it would say family lawyer, criminal lawyer page, and within that I would have grand theft auto, etc., drug trafficking, marriage, divorce counseling, or lawyering. That would be the cornerstone content. Or in the individual landing page, like this should be its own targeted blog post or sub page. And then terms that would be targeted on the home page. So having a designation helps map these keywords in your findings to an actual page. And then intent is so important. You not only want to think about what this person is wanting to find when they type in these phrases, but there are three main types of search intent. There's transactional phrases. This is something like CPA near me or accounting firm in Portland, Oregon. These are people ready to buy essentially, and they know that they need a product or service. There's informational, which would be what does a CPA do? This could be a blog post. It could be somebody just looking for information or how to boil down the services they want to go out and seek. And then there's navigational, and that just means somebody's brand name. It means they're just looking to find something specific, but there's not going to be that transactional element for it. So you typically don't have to worry about that unless you're a huge brand with really good brand recognition or you have a product with a trademark. So grouping these topics together, going through the list and figuring out what the searcher's intent is, and then keeping in mind the sweet spot of a good amount of volume with low competition, that's where your money key phrases are going to be, and organizing it into pieces of content that are topically relevant and similar will help your pages stand out and do well every single time. So the last tool that I use, Screaming Frog, and it's used for the more technical aspects of SEO. You can download the free version. I think you get 500 URLs. So if you just put this in and run start, it'll give you all these different metrics. And there's a few main ones to keep in mind that I want to go over. So when you have pages that are missing on your site, so say you create a page and then you delete it, but it's already in Google's index, it's going to show up as what's known as a 404 error, a response code. You've probably likely seen that in typing in phrases 404 not found. And you're going to want to clean these up. Any 404, you're going to want to implement a 301 redirect so that when users land on that page, they can go to a different page. You'll have to Google how to implement a 301 redirect depending on your system, but that's what you need to do, so be on the lookout for those 404s. The second thing is blocked by robots.txt, and it's here under response codes. This is imperative because if your web pages can't be found, if they can't be indexed by Google, they're being blocked. Nobody can search for them, nobody can come to your site, and nobody can give you money. So you want to make sure that this says 0, or you purposefully blocked something. Next, we'll go down to page titles. And also, we want to keep this in the internal HTML. You want to make this is the amount of web pages that you have, and you want to make sure that it's consistent with how many web pages you know you've actually built. 60 is how many pages I have, so I'm good to go. For page titles, those are those title tags and meta descriptions. That was those two things in Yoast. So you want to make sure that A, you don't have any missing title tags on your site, and that there are also no duplicates, because you want a unique title tag for every single page. The same is true for the meta descriptions. You don't want any missing ones. I do on my site because I'm testing to see if Google can pick up the meanings without it, but you want to write unique ones to get people to click through on your site. You also want to make sure that there's no duplicates as well, that you have unique meta descriptions as well as title tags. And realistically, if you keep those things in mind, then your site will be indexed and understood properly, and you'll be good to go.